So good evening, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to the city's virtual town hall on residential intensification in the built-up areas as part of the Shaping Guelph initiative. It's just 7 o'clock now, and I see a few more attendees joining, so hopefully everybody can sign in all right. If we can advance to the next slide. I'll just share with everyone how we're going to run the Can we flip to the next slide? Thank you. So welcome everyone. My name is Susan Hall and I'm with Lura Consulting and I'll be your moderator this evening. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We are happy to be having a conversation with you this evening. If you are joining by computer or tablet to the WebEx event, you will be able to see, hopefully, the presentation and the panelists at the top. We are also streaming on guelph.ca live and on Facebook. So if you're following along there, the live stream may have just stopped, but we will try to get it up and running again so you can join us. If not, we will be able to post the presentation and recording as soon as possible afterwards so you can see the information there. So for those of you who are on the WebEx, we will be using the chat function. It's a little bubble at the bottom of the screen that looks like a speech bubble, and you can chat to all panelists. We'll be inviting you to ask some questions of the team that way, and we'll be aiming to address as many questions as possible that we receive through WebEx and through the Facebook post as well. So next slide, please. So before we begin, I'd like to, on behalf of the City of Guelph, acknowledge the land that we are on today. So as we gather, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe people on whose traditional territory we are meeting. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time. If you're having any difficulties, let us know, and we'll try to assist to make sure everybody can see the information and can hear the information as well. We are recording the session, as I mentioned, so that we'll be able to post it post-meeting for anybody who was unable to attend. So tonight we have a couple of goals with the agenda. We'd like to share information about Shaping Guelph and the residential intensification, particularly in the built-up area within the city. We want to provide you with an understanding of the planning process, the scenarios the city is looking for feedback on through Have Your Say survey. And we would like to address as many questions as possible. We may not be able to get to everyone's questions tonight. So if the city team is unable to respond to all questions, please feel free to continue to put them in the chat or in the Facebook feed, and we will make sure that they're on the Have Your Say site in the Q&A portion. So our agenda is opening remarks and introductions. We'll have about a 20-25-minute presentation, about half an hour for questions and comments, and are aiming to wrap up with next steps around 8 o'clock. So before we begin, I'd like to ask the project team to introduce themselves. So I'm going to invite each of you to unmute yourself and say hello, and I'll start with you, Natalie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie Goss. I'm a planner with the City of Guelph, and I am managing the Shaping Guelph.
Thanks, Natalie. And Jason?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Dixon, and I'm a policy planner with the City of Guelph.
And Krista?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Krista Waukee, and I'm the General Manager of Planning and Building Services.
Thank you. And Melissa?
Good evening. I'm Melissa Aldonate, the Manager of Policy, Planning, and Urban Design.
Great. And Patricia?
Hello, I'm Patricia Holaisky. I'm with Communications with the City of Guelph.
Great. And Justine?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Justine Hancola, and I'm with Dillon Consulting, the consultant who's being retained by the city to undertake the growth management component of the study, and looking forward to this session. Thank you.
James?
Hi, everyone. I'm James Knott with Laura Consulting.
Great. And Michelle?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle with Laura Consulting.
Okay. Great. Thanks, everyone. So just a reminder, please feel free to put questions into the chat as we go through the presentation, and we'll ask the city team to respond to them in our question and comment period. I would like the same level of respect as we'd have in an in-person meeting, so please be respectful in your comments and your questions, and we look forward to hearing from you throughout the session tonight. With that, Natalie, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for attending our first virtual town hall meeting run by Planning Services. So bear with us as we test a few things out this evening, and hopefully this will be a great virtual event. We'll start off by giving you a little bit of an explanation about land use planning in Ontario. Land use planning in Ontario starts at the provincial level. It starts with the Provincial Planning Act. The Planning Act sets out laws for tools that cities can use throughout Ontario to plan. Tools like establishing an official plan, a zoning bylaw, rules for plans of subdivisions, and for site plans. At the provincial level, there's also some policies that we are required to implement. One of them is the Provincial Policy Statement. And the Provincial Policy Statement provides high-level policy direction for the entire province on priorities and things that cities need to consider as they plan for growth. The other provincial policy, the one that's of particular interest for this project, is the Provincial Growth Plan. It's another set of policies that apply specifically to an area of Ontario that's called the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And the Growth Plan sets out a framework for how this area should grow. Next, we get into the tools that are available to municipalities, such as Guelph. The first is a municipal official plan. And an official plan sets out a vision for growth. It establishes land uses and policies for many items that help shape our city. Policies about urban design, about transportation routes, parks, natural areas, and cultural heritage resources. The final tool that we have is a zoning bylaw, and a zoning bylaw establishes rules for every property in the city. It tells you how you can use your property, how tall buildings can be, how wide lots and buildings can be, and how much parking is required. I'll now go into a little bit more detail about the Provincial Growth Plan. In 2019, the province issued a new growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The growth plan manages growth and development throughout the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It sets out population and employment forecasts that Guelph is required to plan for. It also sets out other targets for certain amounts of new residential units that we have to plan for in our already developed area. The growth plan refers to this area as the built-up area. It also sets out targets for newly planned areas, such as the Maltby area of Guelph and the Guelph Innovation District. These are referred to in the growth plan as designated greenfield areas. It's important to understand that Guelph in the surrounding context. So Guelph is almost completely surrounded by prime agricultural land, as well as provincially protected natural areas. And the rules for these types of land, so prime agricultural land and provincially significant natural areas, means that expanding beyond our boundaries is rather difficult because those lands are protected for agricultural uses or natural systems uses. The growth plan requires that Guelph plan for a population increase of about 60,000 people over the next 30 years. Our target population is 203,000 in 2051. Guelph is also required to plan for an increase in its employment base of approximately 34,000 jobs over the next 30 years. Our target employment base in 2051 is 161,000 jobs. The growth plan also requires that half of new residential units that are constructed in Guelph be within our already developed area. And the slide that you can see now shows Guelph's already developed area in yellow. The already developed area, or built-up area, was our limit of our developed area in 2006, and it was established by the province. The other target that's within the growth plan applies to our downtown, and it requires that we plan for a minimum 150 persons and jobs per hectare within our downtown by 2031. We must also plan for new areas of Guelph, so our designated greenfield areas such as Maltby, and they're required to have a minimum of 50 persons and jobs per hectare. The growth plan is required to be implemented through updates to our official plan, and we're required to update that official plan by July of 2022. So where do we stand right now? In 2019, 42% of our new housing was built within our built-up area. And we created 6,700 new housing units between 2006 and 2019 in our built-up area. Looking ahead, we need to get that percentage, so that number of units within our built-up area, to a minimum of 50%. Which means we need about 12,500 new units over the next 30 years to be built within the built-up area. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to update our official plan to align with the growth plan? In October of last year, Council endorsed a process for us to do that, and the process includes several background studies, and they're listed on this slide. We needed to update our vision and principles for growth, and we've done that stage already. There was a draft that was endorsed by Council in June. We need to do a residential intensification analysis, and that's what your input this evening is feeding into. And next, we need to do a housing analysis and strategy and some growth scenario planning. In addition to the residential aspects of Shaping Guelph, we will also be doing a study of our employment lands to make sure that we have enough land and enough of the right type of land to support our employment growth. The Shaping Guelph process began earlier this year. In February, we launched Shaping Guelph at a speaker event. We heard from Jennifer Keesmaat of the Keesmaat Group, Pamela Robinson with Ryerson University, and Guelph's former Chief Planner, Todd Salter. They shared with us Guelph's growth story and things that we should consider as we plan for our growth over the next 30 years. We also asked the Guelph community what was important to consider as we grow. And we took that input and we drafted an updated vision and principles for growth. And that brings us to where we are now, a conversation about where we should grow and how we should grow within our built-up area. So as I mentioned, in June of this year, Council endorsed a draft vision and principles for growth that we will use in our upcoming background studies as part of Shaping Guelph. The vision and principles is shown over the next few slides, and it's based on our current official plan vision for growth, and it's been modified to align with what we heard from our community earlier this year. This vision acknowledges our rich history and our vibrant new places, and it commits to a full range and mix of housing that's accessible and affordable. It recognizes that Guelph should continue to be designed in ways that make us compact, connected, and complete. It continues our environment-first approach. It recognizes that we want to continue to build a transportation network that provides safe and connected transportation choices. And it celebrates and embraces our cultural heritage. To help implement that vision for growth, we've drafted a series of principles. Many of these principles are already in our official plan, and when we asked the community for their input on them, they agreed that these should continue to be principles going forward. We've made some updates to them to better align with what we heard from you earlier this year. Our official plan includes some intensification policies for residential growth within our built-up area. Our current official plan contains a model for growth that is based on nodes and corridors. This approach plans for most of our growth to occur within the nodes and corridors and downtown. And the nodes and corridors are shown in red on this map here, and downtown is in pink, and the built-up area is in purple. Additionally, our official plan also plans for growth throughout our neighborhoods. Generally, this is in the form of low-rise apartments, townhouses, and accessory apartments. Within these areas, there are different land uses, such as commercial and mixed use, medium and high-density residential within our nodes and corridors and downtown. These areas allow for different heights and densities depending on what the planned use of land is. I'll now give you a brief overview of a survey that we have available for you to fill out. As I mentioned earlier, we are currently at the residential intensification analysis stage of Shaping Guelph. This is the first component of the technical analysis that we're required to do. It looks at our ability to accommodate residential growth within the built-up area over the next 30 years. We hope to answer through this technical work how much capacity we have within our built-up area for new homes. Until September 24th, our survey is asking the Guelph community to provide input on 3 topics. You can see those on this slide. This online survey focuses on housing within our already developed area, our built-up area. There will be additional consultation later in the process about jobs and about different growth scenarios. Right now, it's important for us to understand your thoughts and opinions on where housing should be directed, how much housing there should be, and what maximum building heights should be within different areas of our built-up area. The survey will ask you to place markers on a map, telling us places where you think there should be new housing and places where you think maybe there shouldn't be as much new housing. Recall that the growth plan requires us to plan for about half of our residential growth within our built-up area. Where we put that growth within our built-up area, how we distribute it around the built-up area is up to us. This survey provides you with 3 different housing distribution scenarios: more housing downtown, more housing in nodes and corridors, and more housing distributed throughout the built-up area. And it asks you your thoughts and opinions about these different scenarios and to rate them. The main questions we are trying to answer with the residential intensification analysis are what lands are available to accommodate new residential units and how many units are appropriate to accommodate in different areas of the city. Much of that depends in part on how many units are allowed on a lot and how tall buildings can be. So the final series of questions will ask you to rate different building height scenarios. These are the examples, or these are the 3 scenarios that you will see in the survey for nodes. And these are the 3 scenarios that you will see for corridors, for our downtown, and our low density areas. One scenario shows you...
Natalie, I'm going to ask you to pause for a second. It looks like the folks on the Facebook Live can't see your screen. Can we share your screen? directly?
Yes, let me try that.
And just go back to the scenarios, please, so they can see the visuals.
Yep, thank you.
Perfect.
Susan.
Thank you.
Susan, can I get some feedback as to whether we can see this?
Just checking, there is a bit of a
It's
delay.
working, Natalie, on Facebook. I can see it there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. This recording will be available after the event, so you will be able to see and hear the full presentation and provide comments after the fact and ask staff any questions via email, phone, or our Q&A on Have Your Say. I'll just go through some of these slides. So we had left off with scenarios for maximum building height. So I'm highlighting now the third series of questions in the survey, and it takes you through a number of building height scenarios for nodes, and these are the three scenarios that you'll see. The first scenario is always what our current official plan permits. The second scenario is what we're referring to as taller building heights, and the third scenario is our tallest building height scenario. Generally, the taller building height scenario adds a little bit more height. It ranges depending on whether it's a node, corridor, downtown, or our low density areas with 1 to 4 additional stories. And the third scenario, which is the tallest building height scenario, again, varies depending on if it's a node, corridor, downtown, or the built up area, and ranges between 2 and 8 stories. So these are the scenarios for nodes, the scenarios for maximum building heights in corridors, for our downtown, and low density neighborhoods throughout the built up area. And that ends our background component of the presentation. I can pass it back to Susan.
Okay, great. Thanks, Natalie. Apologies for the screen. Hopefully that worked through the switchover for those on Facebook and on Guelph Live. We certainly can go back to some of those slides if we need to. We've got a few questions that are coming in through the, and comments coming in through the chat. So we'll look to address as many of those as we can during the time that we have, and I'll ask the city team, Melissa, Natalie, and Jason to respond, and I'll just ask, we get a bit of feedback if we've got more than one mic on at the time, so we'll just make sure our mic's off and everybody can hear well. So the first one is, why is the Guelph Innovation District not part of this survey? There's 328 acres that would already help the growth plan, and the same question for the Clare Maltby area.
Good evening, everyone. This is Melissa Aldonate. The two areas that are in question, the Guelph Innovation District and Clare Maltby, are secondary plan areas within our Greenfield area of the city, and they will be addressed in relation to the growth plan as part of the Greenfield area. Tonight's session is focused solely on our built-up area and residential intensification.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And there's another one. Will infrastructure such as additional water supply be put in place to accommodate the growth?
In terms of infrastructure, the city is currently conducting master plans for both our water supply and wastewater treatment, and those ongoing studies will consider the infrastructure required to meet the growth to 2051.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. A similar question, so what about the downtown secondary plan and how does it fit?
In the presentation, Natalie touched on the downtown, so we are looking for feedback on growth scenarios for the downtown. Our downtown secondary plan does plan downtown to 2031 to meet 150 persons and jobs per hectare, and we are looking at what additional growth could be accommodated to 2051 within the downtown through this study.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Melissa. How about affordable housing? So how is it to be part of the anticipated growth?
In terms of affordable housing, the city has an approved affordable housing strategy. Through that strategy and our official plan policies, the city has a target that 30% of all new residential development in any given year would be affordable. And the benchmarks for affordability, both ownership and rental, are set each year. This study will look at providing a full range and mix of housing, including affordable housing.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Do we have enough resources to accommodate the growth?
In terms of resources, so in terms of water, wastewater, ability to capture and treat stormwater, all of these matters will be considered through master plans that are ongoing with the city. And in later stages of this work, we will be looking at the implications of growth and how to ensure that we are able to accommodate growth through our existing resources and understand what improvements need to be done to ensure that we can meet this growth in the city.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melissa. A number of master plans underway. A question about why can't the city boundaries be expanded?
The growth plan requires us to consider it actually requires us to meet the growth within our current boundaries. Technical studies would need to be done if we cannot meet that growth. So through our background studies, we are looking at whether our existing land supply can accommodate the growth that's required. Should we not be able to meet that growth, we will need to consult with the province as our approval authority to consider modifications to our boundary, if that was necessary.
Okay, just looking at some of the other ones coming in. So there's a question about when we're talking about how tall, how would we know how much parking would be assigned? And the comment with it is 12 stories with limited parking would be detrimental to residents and people in the area that would be parking along adjacent streets. So I guess the question of how much parking is assigned when we're thinking about additional heights.
Currently, the city is conducting a comprehensive zoning bylaw review that is looking at parking regulations. So our zoning bylaw is the tool through which we regulate the number of parking that's required for residential units. So that study is ongoing currently. And this official plan is looking at the types of growth and where they would be appropriate. So the implications of things such as parking, amenity space, anything that goes along with development, the regulations and rules are set out through our zoning bylaw. And we do have considerations for that as we're considering our implications for growth in certain areas.
Okay, thank you. So question on, can the city balance the growth amongst the nodes and corridors? It seems like all the intensification is currently happening on Gordon.
So our current official plan does direct the majority of our intensification efforts to our nodes and corridors. That's where we're looking at high density development occurring. So Gordon Street is an intensification corridor, so we are seeing a significant amount of development happening there. We are looking through this study whether our current nodes and corridors are the appropriate areas for growth. Should more growth be directed to those areas? We are considering through this where else development could occur within our built-up area.
Okay, great, and certainly an opportunity for folks to share their views on that in the survey as well. Okay, another question. Why is the city developing by Highway 7 and 6? Those could be better suited as density corridors.
Yes, that is something that we can consider through the growth plan study as an area to consider either for employment growth or future residential growth. Okay, great. And a bit of a circle back question. So we asked previously about the Innovation District and Clare Maltby. So the question is, with those two areas will help with the densification target. So why is the city doing the Clare and Clare Maltby and Innovation District separately? So the Guelph Innovation District secondary plan is complete and approved, and it was considered the 2006 growth plan. So it does contribute towards our growth and development to 2031. The Clare Maltby secondary plan is our last greenfield area. So we are, through that study, looking at a designed plan for that area as to what is appropriate for growth and development within Clare Maltby. And they are intended, specifically Clare Maltby, it feeds into this growth strategy. So it's being done separately so that we can understand that specific area of the city and what is appropriate and how it contributes to the overall growth and development of the city. The downtown plan, again, was developed as part of the implementation of the 2006 growth plan, and we are considering it in terms of what future development could occur there to 2031 and to 2051.
Okay, thank you. Just a further comment on on the parking study. So isn't it unfair to conduct a parking study and this study at the same time? It creates a big moving target, and it could result in a double hit for the Gordon Street if the heights are increased and the parking is decreased. So I don't know if there's a response to that or just that it's input.
Yeah, yes, that's great input to have. And I would just point out to people as we're looking at our parking study, it is parking ratios based on residential units. So it's not for a 10-story or a 12-story building. So each unit within the an apartment building or a townhouse or a detached dwelling would have a parking rate set for that unit. So it would be a requirement that developers would have to meet, and it would be considered for the whole of the building based on the number of units that are within that. So they would be required to meet our parking requirements.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Gordon Street, so back to Gordon. So Gordon Street is shown as a density corridor all the way to Stone Road, yet there are no plans to widen from Edinburgh to Stone, mainly because it is extremely expensive with hydro poles so close to the road. So it's more of a comment than a question, I guess. And then another question would be, would the city do a second survey once areas are more defined?
Yes, there are more engagement opportunities through this study.
Okay, great. just seeing things as they come in. Great to see some of the things in the chat and a few from Facebook earlier. If anybody else on Facebook has questions, please feel free to type them into Facebook, and Patricia is following along to make sure we can see those. Okay. So there's another one question along the lines of, would the city provide environmental studies along with the second survey?
At this level of study, the natural heritage system for the city is already protected through our official plan. So the boundaries and buffers of our natural environmental features are protected through our official plan. Specific environmental studies related to development occur through a development application process. So as a development comes forward, there will be requirements for environmental impact studies, and that would determine whether the development could occur, whether buffers had to be increased, that sort of thing. So with this level of study, we're looking at the natural heritage system already being protected through our official plan.
Okay, great. So there's one that is, we are forecast to grow by 60,000 people over the next 30 years. Is this growth anticipated to be evenly distributed over that time? So I guess over that time horizon.
Yes, so the growth plan does require that we plan for an additional 60,000 people over the next 30 years. And what we're considering through this study is, and as we prepare growth scenarios, is how that growth would be distributed. So currently our official plan is looking at about a 1.5% growth rate, annual growth rate. So we will be looking at what that annual growth rate would be, how when over the period we would be expecting higher growth rates than others. So that would be determined through our growth scenarios that will be coming forward in the next stages of this study.
Okay, great. Question about how will the city use public feedback from the session tonight, as well as the Have Your Say survey?
Okay, so the community input that we receive will be used to inform our recommendations for future Shaping Guelph background studies, for our future growth scenario work, and ultimately it will be used in an updated growth management strategy for the city. Earlier this year, our community input that we received through our sessions in January and February, we've already used that to inform our updated vision and principles for growth, which were endorsed by Council in June.
Okay, great. Another one, what is the city's role in planning for 34,000 new jobs over the next 30 years?
So yes, as part of our growth plan conformity work, we're required to ensure that we have enough employment land available and designated to support the additional 34,000 jobs.
Okay, great. I'm just seeing a longer comment come in. So we have from the Skyline group of companies. I'll just read out the comment provided. So we currently employ 300 people in the downtown and manage 20,000 rental apartments in 57 communities across 8 provinces. We are a proponent of investment and growth in the downtown. I believe the survey and current official plan is modest, with heights up to 18 stories near the main transit hub. Cities of similar size have put in place tall building guidelines and with podiums, providing the appropriate scale to the pedestrian realm to allow for housing around major transit stations. And we can take a short drive to Milton that recently approved 31 stories, or Kitchener, which has approved multiple tall buildings next to transit, the tallest being 39. Rest assured, Guelph will continue to have the shortest buildings than any other city of similar size in Ontario if we add a few more floors downtown. So a further thought, investment of attainable housing and jobs is needed in the downtown. The current vision only includes office around the city's central transit hub. The idea of an office node in downtown core doesn't work. It's been well documented in several cities that there is crime if office workers leave, and then the only viable retail after 6 o'clock are food service, so restaurant or bars. Recent crime in the area and investment and lack of investment in the office node are evidence of this. So mixed-use buildings have been tested and proven across the province as desirable and sustainable. Different people at different times of day support retailers and make our streets safer. And the thought is, I think, a bold direction to support retailers to allow more housing in the downtown is the right direction to go. So a strong voice. Thank you for sharing that. Strong voice for more housing in the downtown for that one. And you're welcome. Thanks for the note. Okay, just looking to see if there is other ones. So there's another one. What is the relationship between the 3 scenarios where more housing could be provided in the city? And, oops, I lost the second part of it, sorry. What is the relationship between the 3 scenarios where more housing could be provided in the city and the scenarios for different building heights in the city?
Okay, so generally, the more units that can be accommodated in one area, the less land we may need for future growth. However, the more units that are directed to one particular area, the more room they may take up in that area. So we could accommodate this by allowing buildings to take up more space on the ground, which would give them a bigger footprint. And that could leave less space for other things like amenity areas, green space, and parking. Or it could also be accommodated by allowing buildings to be taller.
Okay, great. And certainly encouraging feedback on those options within the survey as well, within the downtown and nodes and corridors and the lower density areas. Just looking further, there's one that's a bit of a longer comment. I'm not sure if the team will be able to answer it right now. I think it's in relation to the current official plan. So Gordon Street between Arkell and Edinburgh in the official plan shows a wetland area as built area, and then it's also shown as a green area on another section and as a wetland. So why would it be shown as built when it's a significant wetland? So it's referencing specific pages within the official plan. If the team needs to kind of take that away and come back, that's fine. Or if you have a response, that's great.
I can address it briefly right now. There's a number of schedules in our official plan. So there's one schedule that's Schedule 1. It's our growth plan elements, and it sets out the boundary of the built-up area. So Natalie showed generally that schedule in the presentation this evening, and that schedule does not specify land uses, so it doesn't identify wetlands or a natural heritage system. It just sets out the boundary of the city and the boundary of our built-up area and the lands that are greenfield. As you go through the schedules, Schedule 2 sets out our land use designations. The land use designation schedule sets out whether lands are designated for residential, employment uses, or a natural heritage system. And as you go further into the schedules, you start to see the natural heritage system, and it's broken down into what the features are. So that's generally what that comment is about. So the built-up area does include wetlands, woodlands, employment lands, residential lands, the University of Guelph, those kinds of things.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melissa. Another general comment, so just around thinking about if we have more housing downtown, that people will be driving and that there'll be, a further comment about the need for parking for units and for visitors if we have more folks downtown. I think we've made it through all of the questions that we've had. Patricia, anything further from Facebook? Nope. Okay. I'm not seeing any others. Oh, there's one more here, sorry. A question about what type of housing is planned for the Dolime Quarry when it comes online, and will this be a higher density node?
So some of you may recall that the city did some consultation on the Dolime as part of some scenarios for protecting water resources in the city. The Dolime Quarry is not within the current city boundaries, so it's not being considered as land that is available to accommodate growth at this time. Should those lands become part of the city, we would consider them at that time. So right now, there's no certainty related to those lands, and they're not within the city for us to consider as part of our growth scenarios now.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I don't see any further ones coming through just yet. I'll just give it a moment or two, see if there's any more. So one more. Will affordable housing programs or incentives be considered in this municipal review?
So as I mentioned before, the city has an affordable housing strategy that council approved. As part of that strategy, the council also approved an affordable housing financial incentives program. So the funding for that program is determined by council on an annual basis. This municipal review will not be looking again at affordable housing programs and incentives. They are part of our affordable housing strategy.
Okay, great. So a number of other strategies and initiatives underway that are related. I'm not seeing any further questions come through. I'll just give it a moment, and then if nothing else comes in, Natalie, I'll ask you to just do the next step. Okay, so I think with that, I'll just ask Natalie to move to the next steps. We have shared the presentation tonight, and that will be available if people want to look through it again. The survey also has the illustrations of the different scenarios, so you can take some time and look at them in there and provide feedback as well. So Natalie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for participating and asking questions and providing comments. Input will be considered as we prepare the next stages of Shaping Guelph, so there'll be more to come later in 2020 and throughout 2021 as well. A summary of all the community feedback that we will be receiving on our residential intensification analysis will be available later this year. So thank you so much for participating today. Our online survey is open until September 24th at haveyoursay.guelph.ca. If you have additional questions, you can also submit them through the Have Your Say website, or you can email them to us at the email address that's on the screen there. And thank you once again. It was a pleasure to present this information to you virtually this evening. Thank you very much.